and welcome to Cortland County Historical Society. Our Lunch and Learn lecture today is Ann Henderson, the Preble historian, and we're anxious to hear what Ann's got to say. I'd like to tell you that next week we have Doug Bentley talking about Ray Smith and Cortland Line Company. August 3rd, we're going to have Mary and Carl Kimberly talking about the New York Central College, and on August 10th, Chip Jeremy is going to be here talking about the Cortland Traction Company and Little York Park. So any of those, you're welcome to come to. I'll just give the floor to Ann. All right, enjoy.
Here we go. Well, I'll stand up here in front of all I brought a lot of pictures and things, and you're welcome to look at these afterwards, if you like. As I said, my name is Ann Henderson. I've been the town historian in Preble since 2000. I took it over from Dorothy Ruff. A lot of you here might remember Dorothy. And as far as being a historian, you know, Dorothy was kind of like my mentor. I learned a lot from Dorothy, and she was kind of like my second mother. And she always, you know, was around with my kids and even with my grandkids. You know, they all knew Dorothy, and they all called her Dorothy. You know, and so and she was it for many years. And before Dorothy, you probably would know too. Some of which you'd remember was Stella Curie. And she lived in Preble for many years, her whole life in Preble. And she was a longtime historian. So there was, that was Mrs. Curie, and then Dorothy and myself. And I said, my name is Ann Henderson. I've lived in Preble since 1960. I grew up in Little York, and then I married a great guy from Preble, and he moved me to Preble so, in 1960. And we lived in Baltimore for about 5 years, and then we moved about a mile down the road to Slab City, where the family farm was. His mother had died, and we moved down there and operated the farm and milked cows and everything till 1999. And so I've always liked Preble. When I came into Preble, I liked it. I got involved in the town, seems like right off the bat, and there was everything about it that I liked. My dad was born on West Preble Hill, and my great-grandmother Hill, Caroline Hill, lived up on West Preble Hill with the family. And when women got the right to vote, that morning she rode off the hill in a wagon with the milk cans with my grandfather, and he dropped her off at the voting place. And later on, it was decided that she was the first woman to vote in the town of Preble. So later on, like in about 1979, they were looking for someone to run for supervisor in the town of Preble, and the committee man asked me if I knew of anybody that wanted to run, and I said maybe I would be interested. And he looked at me and he said, I think it ought to be a man. No offense to you guys, but that made me so mad. So I went, and a few days later he came my back door and he said, well, you're curious about running for supervisor. And I said, you can't find a man? I was so mad, you know. Well, you know, will you run? And I said, yes, I will. You know? And so I did, and it was a good experience for me. And in my campaign, when I went around town and talked to people, I said, if my great-grandmother could be the first lady to vote in Preble, let me be the first woman supervisor. I don't know if she helped me or not. Anyway, I did run, and I served in that capacity for 3 terms. And I really liked it because I felt like I got women involved in the town. I think before then, you know, women, they didn't get involved in things, you know. And I would go to them and I'd say, please come, you know, I want to know what you're thinking about, what you want to do, and, you know. And so I always felt I got women kind of started to get involved in the town. So that was a job I really enjoyed for a long time. And then after that I went to work in the county clerk's office in Cortland for Judy Rillman for 10 years. And then I retired out of there, and then they had an opening in the New York Post Office, so I went down and I went to work in the New York Post Office, and I worked there for about 7 years, I guess it was, you know, and then I became the town historian. So, you know, I got that job, and then I'm also involved in our cemetery association in Preble. I'm the secretary treasurer of that, and I put 3 grandchildren on the school bus every morning, and that's my best job that I've had ever. You know, so I stay busy, and I still live on the farm there in Slab City. Okay, so when Preble started out, Preble had different areas of the town, and Baltimore, which if all of you know, if you go up Route 11 and you'll go through, you'll come to Baltimore. There's no sign there, it says Baltimore, but that's where Baltimore is. They're right near where you come off from East Homer, and that's where Preble kind of started, was over in there. The first post office was over there. And some of the homes in Baltimore today were built many, many years ago, and they still are there, and people still live in them. And they, you know, they were built, some of them in early 1800 there, you know, and they're still really in good shape overall, you know. And so there's Baltimore up there. Preble has different sections. And so you've got Baltimore on Route 11 there north. Between Baltimore and Curry Road, they call that Dutch Street because many of the Dutch settled there. And if you go south from Baltimore, down south, down into Little York, but you'll come to Slab City. And that's where I live. And years and years ago, there were a lot of sawmills along the river, and it was a real active part of the town. And then you go back up to the Preble Road, and then that brings you into Preble Center, which is the main heart of Preble. And then they had Preble, well, Preble Corners, I guess, too, was up by Curry's. No, Preble Corners is over on the west side of Preble. And a man named John Gill came over the hill from Spafford, so they say, and he settled on the west side of Preble. And another fellow named James Kravis, so the story goes, he walked from Pompey to Preble, which was quite a walk years ago. And he got there and he looked it over, and I guess he didn't like it, and he walked back home. But then they said the next year he came back, and he thought about it, and he came back, and he stayed there, and I guess lived the rest of his life there. Preble is approximately 28 square miles. We're 16 miles south of Syracuse. We're 5 miles north of Cortland, and we cover, here's Cortland County, and we cover 5% of Cortland County. So, even though we're little, I think, you know, people know about us. We have things going on in Preble, and, you know, people in Preble seem to be real active all the time. The churches, the first church was in Preble back like in the 1850s, and then that started up on Curry Road, and then it stayed there, and then about in like 1859 or sometime, they moved that church across the valley, wondering how they ever did that. They moved it across the valley to where the big white church in Preble now stands today, with the lighted steeple on it, and how they ever did such a thing those many years ago, but they did. And we've had that light shining in that steeple now for many, many years. And once in a while, our church gets a letter from someone, like, you know, usually someone maybe who's been in a family in the Syracuse hospitals, and then they're coming back home. And one lady wrote us once, and her husband was very bad in Syracuse, and it was wintertime, but she said, when I get to Preble and I see the lighted steeple, I know I'm almost home. And she says, I know I'm going through an area where people care about people. So we get really, really good compliments for, you know, our steeple light. And we had to have it out once for a while for some kind of repairs, and we got things from people, how come the steeple's not lit? They really look forward to that, you know. Now in Preble, we have 8 cemeteries, and they're all in different parts of the town. Most of you are familiar with where Preble is. I think most everybody is. Okay, we have like 8 cemeteries in Preble. The one is up on Curry Road, and that's one of our oldest ones. There's still some stones there, but you know, it's hard to read them and like that, but that's been up there for many years. And then we have one out in Tisco Valley. I'm not sure of the names of a couple of them. I'd like to, I thought someone said that you had names of cemeteries maybe here. That's what I was going to look at to see, because there's a couple, you know, I don't know where they are. And so we have the one on Curry Road, and then you come down into Preble and go over, or down Route 11 and go over, and you go over the bridge to go into Preble. Out there to the left, way out, is a very small cemetery, which was a family cemetery, I guess. I don't, but the name of that would have been maybe the Baltimore Cemetery. And then you cross the tracks in Preble and go up where our boulder is, right over 81 there. And in the back part of that area, there was a cemetery there for a very short time, and they called it the smallpox cemetery, because smallpox did come to Preble, and that was where the people were buried who had died of smallpox. And when it ebbed and went away, you know, it cleared, they shut that down and they never used it again. And then you go up in back of our highway barn, there's another cemetery there. John Gill was an early settler who came over from Scotland and settled in that area of Preble. But I had read once that he kind of fell into money problems or something, and he went to Pennsylvania, and he never came back to Preble. But Mrs. Gill is buried there behind the highway barn. There is a stone there with her name on it, so must be left her and went to Pennsylvania. And then out in the Tisco Valley farther, there's another small cemetery without any name and very few stones in it. And then come back and you go up over West Preble Hill, and there's a cemetery up in there. And many years ago, Dorothy Rove took me up there, and there was a stone there from a Revolutionary War soldier. And then I went back years later, and someone had taken the stone. And that's what happens, you know. People go in and they take these stones and they make sidewalks out of them and things at their house. You know, they use them for decoration, and they take these stones. I remember reading a couple of years ago, somebody found a stone at a garage sale in Florida. And anyway, it belonged to someone over in the Solon area or somewhere, and it finally did get back to the family, back up here in Cortland County, but this person found it at a garage sale in Florida, you know, so they, you know, do things like that. And then, of course, we have our Elmwood Cemetery. That's our cemetery that we operate today, and that was started in 1868. The Van Hoosen family in Preble owned many properties, and there were a lot of Van Hoosens that lived in Preble, and they gave the land there for the cemetery. And when that became the main cemetery in town, some families had their relatives transferred to the Elmwood Cemetery, where it was a bigger cemetery and would be taken care of. And their stones are like in the front of the cemetery when you go in. And a lot of our stones there in the cemetery now are in disrepair. And so we learned last year of a program through State Cemetery Association where we could apply, and they would, the state would pay for this to fix these old stones in our cemetery. And we have, our cemetery has submitted an application for that. In fact, today, the State Cemetery Association in Albany is looking over our papers. So, you know, we hope that, you know, they decide to, you know, give us, you know, or put the money up for us to fix the stones, because there are many of them there that needed to be repaired. And they can become a danger, you know, too, as they go in and they lean, you know, if they come over, they could, you know, hurt a person badly or kill a child or something. So we hope that they do choose us and that we'll be able to. And then we have another cemetery, just one more, and that's the St. Leo Cemetery. That's right on the border between Preble and Tully, and that's the Catholic cemetery, and that's been there for many years. So we do have 2 active cemeteries within our township. And we pride ourselves in making our cemetery look nice, because we're right on 281, you know, and you're right there when you go by, you look out your window and say, oh, you know, that looks nice, or oh dear, they need help, you know, or something. And so we try to pride ourselves and keep the cemetery looking good, and it does. So I talked a little bit about the school. Well, about the schools, the first school was in Baltimore, and it was up on East. If you went into Baltimore and up the Truxton East Homer Road there, and then there's a road off to the left that says East Hill, and right on that corner is where the first school was in Preble. And quite a few years ago now, we had a historical marker placed there telling about the site of this first school and who the teacher was and everything, and so that's there. And then when Preble started, and as it became more populated, everywhere where they settled a little bit, they built a school. And so at one time there were about as many as 8 schools here and there all around in Preble. And they did build one bigger school in a different area of town, and that operated for a while. And then in 1906, they built the Preble School that you can look at now. And this is a Preble School now, and this was a Preble School in 1906. So we've done a really good job of keeping that school, you know, that building looking good for us. And today the post office is in one part, and then the town hall is in the other part. But for quite a long time, kids in Preble went to that school. And I know I talking with my husband, he went there, and he said, you know, it was just a small school, he said, and we all knew each other. And he said on days it rained, we played in the cellar, and on days it didn't rain, we were in the swings out back, you know. And he said everybody knew everybody. And he said you went home at lunchtime and had meals with your family, many of them, you know. And then in the 1950s, they closed it, and the kids in Preble had to go to Homer. And that was, I talked with other ones that live in Preble now that went through that, and they said that was a really big change for all of us in Preble. You know, many of us went home and had lunch at noon or time or something, and their fathers would bring them to school. I know, and the manure spreader in the back, the manure spreader sometimes was pouring rain or the sleet, you know, and they didn't care. All the kids got in the back and they got to ride home. I was told about that too. And they knew each other, and you know, they felt so safe. They were in a small town and they just felt safe. And then suddenly they're through into this big school in Homer. So that was a really big change for the kids in Preble to go through. Now, we did have some lodges in Preble, too. The Masonic Lodge started in Preble in 1814, and it was the second one in Cortland County to be started. And then they had an Oddfellows Hall Lodge that they started in 1846, and that was over in Baltimore. But then as the population changed and moved over to the center of town, it came over into Preble. Now the Oddfellows started that, like I said, in 1846. They moved to Preble and built one in 1851. And that was a big, big building. And it burned down in the 40s sometime. And I remember my sister-in-law and my husband telling me, you know, well, the school got on fire, and all those kids ran out of school, and we ran right up the street, and we sat in the lawn there, and we watched the school burn. And, you know, and they didn't want to go back to school, but then they said, finally the teachers came up, and we had to go back to school, but they all wanted to stay there and watch the Oddfellows Hall burn, you know. And then the Preble Fire Department built their building there later on, and it's still there. And that's another thing too. They have the Preble Fire Department, and that was formed, I guess, about in the 40s. It was, and Elmer Anderson. Maybe some of you knew Karen Anderson. Her dad, Elmer Anderson, he was very active in the town back then. He was a supervisor, and he was like in everything in the town there, you know. And the firemen wanted to have a fire station. And and I think that Mr. Anderson was a town supervisor or something then. Well, anyway, they gave the fire, now this is like in the 1940s, and they gave the fire department $3,000. And they said, you buy a fire truck and you build a building. And they did. And they did. And so, you know, to think to do something like that today would be quite a thing to do, you know. And a lot of what Preble is, and I think is what people associate with Preble, is farming. We have some of the best soil in the state of New York in the town of Preble. And we've always been famous, and we've always been famous for cabbage too. You know, if you thought of Cabbage, you thought of Preble. And about every farmer in Preble raised cabbage because it was like a cash crop for them. You know, they'd pay off their mortgage or something, or just, you know, keep on surviving on the farm, you know. And it was a good cash crop, and about every, as I said, about every farmer in Preble grew cabbage, myself included. And it wasn't easy. It was a hard job. You had to grow your own cabbage plants, you know, like in a cabbage bed. Then you had to go in there and pull out the best ones that you were going to put out in the field and plant. And then with ours, we had a very old cabbage setter, and when you sat on it, it had these little rollers that could take your fingers off if it just, you know, you think it'd take your fingers off if you got it in there wrong, and you drop that cabbage plant in there and hope that some dirt went around it and it would grow. And then you cut it by hand. You didn't have a machine. You got a knife and you went up and down the aisle rows there, and you cut the cabbage by hand and you loaded it, you know. We did a lot of that. Our kids got sick of it, I think, after they figured out how much work it was. They didn't like it so much, you know, when they got to be teenagers, you know. And one time I know my husband came in and he said, we got to have this load of cabbage up to Mr. Knapp in Preble was going to buy this load of cabbage, but he had to have it ASAP. So myself and the hired man, and we had one small child, and we all went out in the field and we cut the cabbage, cut, and we had a baby carriage tied on the back of the wagon. And we got it all loaded, and my husband's hollering, ready, yes, go on. So I took the child out of the baby carriage and walked to the house with a hired man. And after a while, my husband came back and he said, he says, I got up there and Mr. Knapp come out and he saw that baby carriage tied on the back end. He said, you make everybody work down there? You know, it was hard work, you know. And then you bagged it, and you bagged it lots of times, you know, and you were doing that late at night or something. But now back to some other things. I said many people that come from New England, and now we'll go back in time to the industries, because many people came into the Preble area and they came from New England. And then some of them came from the western part of the state too. They came across from there and settled. And this man named Samuel Woolston was down in Slab City, or he bought over 600 acres near the river in Slab City. And he made bricks down there, and they made bricks there. They had a sawmill down there, and I guess in a grist mill, and I guess that's how the name Slab City came into being. It used to be on road maps. I could get a road map and I'd find Slab City, and we're still on the map. But I guess it's gone now, because I got a map not long ago and I couldn't find Slab City. But Baltimore's still on there, and it still says Baltimore. So they took Slab City off of it, you know. And parts are still visible today on the property in Slab City. And at a time they said they had 5 big grist mills or something built right along that dam. And where I live, if you're going up Route 11 and you get above Goodale Lake, if you know where Goodale Lake is on Route 11, and you go a little farther, and you go down a hill and over a bridge, and there's 2 farms over there, and I'm on the one farm. And so the river goes right down through, and so it would go right down through, and below me was a man named Clayton Smith, and he was a very industrious man. He could make anything. And then there's a dam down there on our land too. And he got his water power off of that dam, and he had electricity in his house and everything, and he ran it from the power off of the river there. It was unbelievable. And in the fall, all the farmers around Preble would bring loads of apples down to him, and he would make apple cider down there. And I would go down there just to see and then take my children down. And he had all these little gadgets and things running all over, you know, and everything was going. And you'd watch, you know, pretty soon there was the cider coming out, you know. So he made his own cider. There's a different person, of course, that owns it now. But he's kind of kept all that stuff, too. He's done a good job of trying to preserve a lot of that, what Mr. Smith had down there. So that's... And they had shoemakers, they had brick makers, they had tanners, a lot of blacksmiths in town they had too. And, you know, people, the women, of course, the women, they stayed home with the children, you know, but I think the women worked just as hard as the men in those days. They went out and did work too. Now the post office, the first one was over in Baltimore. And another thing too, before they named it Baltimore, there were so many Crowfoot people that lived over there. Everybody lived there with the name Crowfoot, that they called it Crowfootville. Well, then the post office was going to come into Preble. And, but they told them, they said, before we put the post office anywhere there, or in Baltimore they wanted to put it, before we put it there, you've got to get yourselves a name. And so then they say that, thus they called it Baltimore. And they let the post office in over there in Baltimore to start with. And then I think it stayed there. And then as Preble grew and you know, the population increased and everything, they moved it over more into the center of town. And it kind of, you know, you'd see like in small towns, you probably still see it today in some small towns, the post office would be in someone's home. Or it was in people's homes in Preble. It was in a hotel for a while. And I know one person, one family, they had it in their house. Carl Johnson and his wife had it in their house for 30 years. You know. So, and but you know, and then when the town bought the old schoolhouse, then they moved the post office down there. Well, we still got problems with the post office in Preble because I don't know where it is now. I guess they
No one does.
Judy. Oh, here.
It's in the New York post office.
It's in the New York post office. You know, it stayed in Preble all these many years, and then things started happening a few years ago, and it went out of the post office. The post office is still there, but the mailboxes went out. And they went up into a grocery store there on 281 in Preble, and it was in there. Well, then that guy went out of business, so then I guess they didn't know what to do with the post office, so they moved the boxes down to New York post office now. So now people in Preble who have a mailbox have to drive down there and get their mail, and New York post office is about as big as, well, not very big. And they've got their mailboxes there, plus the New York mailboxes are there. You got a gas station there. And I wonder they don't have a bad accident or something, because you got New York people, Preble people, and then people on gas all trying to get into the space down there, you know. And so, I don't know, we don't know what is going to happen with it. No. And the thing, we always did have a post office there, and it was right in our town hall, and it was a good place. That part of the post office is still there. You can still go in there and buy a stamp, but you can't get your mail. That's weird. So now they're in an uproar over where are you going to get your mail?
And shut them down.
They never had that trouble before with the post office, I don't think. Preble's always been a big dairy community. We don't have as many farms, active farms up there anymore as you used to. You used to be able to drive right through Preble and everybody you saw had a farm. And, but farming changed a lot. And it seemed to get, I know in our case, it got to the point where we either had to get bigger or get out. And at our age, we weren't going to get bigger. And our oldest son, who had been working on the farm with us since he was a kid, wanted to do something else, and you couldn't blame him. And so that's how we exited. But we still ran our land out. I still rent my land out, but there's no cows there or anything, you know. And I got one grandson that keeps telling me, oh, he says, I wish you still had cows here, Grandma. I wish you were still farming here, but, you know, not to be. And so the farms, and we got bigger farms, and that's one big change that you do see in Preble now. And I guess the good thing is that the big farms in Preble rent the smaller farms land because they need a lot of land, you know, so that helps out us smaller farmers. We can rent our land out to the big farmers, you know. And back in about 1940, I guess it was, a bunch of farmers in Preble got together and wanted to have their own milk cooperative. And in 1940, in November, I think it was in 1940, they did form the Preble Milk Co-op. It's located just over the railroad tracks as you go through Preble headed towards Route 11. It's right there. It's been there for 75 years. And it still operates good. They have very good management, you know, and they run a very, very, very good business there. Last November, they had a big celebration for the 75th anniversary of the milk co-op there. But, you know, things continue to change, but that's one business that's still there. It's not the oldest business in Preble, but I think it's the second oldest business we would find is still operating in Preble continually, hasn't gone out of business. The oldest business in Preble would be the Preble Hotel, and so that's been there way back, I think 1865 or somewhere. And before that, probably they had other little places that was like a hotel, you know, but the Preble Hotel itself is that way. I know one year back in the 50s or 60s, it caught on fire. They had a fire at the Preble Hotel, and they said they had something like 13 fire companies come to help them, and they stretched the hoses that night from the hotel over 281, down through Preble, past the milk plant, on the bend before you go to Route 11. The hose lines stretched that far that night. But, you know, the hotel was saved and they fixed it up, and it's still going today. Another thing about the Preble Fire Department, now this is about today, if you can imagine this, but they started it back, you know, in the 40s, and they had the $3,000, and they built a truck, and for a long time, that original first fire truck was owned by Murray Steger down on Steger Road. And they had it, and you'd go by sometimes and you would see it there still, and it was the first fire truck that they had. When it started out, if a fire was, they sounded, the church bell sounded the alarm. And then later on, Carrie Gardner, who lived in Preble for a number of years, she lived right straight across the way from the fire department, and she did this for 27 years. She took the calls, and I guess you called Carrie and you told her you needed the fire department, and she went running across the street to the fire department. There was right across the street from her, and somehow or other this lady went in there and the alarm went off and the fireman came running. So that's how they handled that. And back when the fire department was operating, a lot of your firemen then were farmers, and they all lived in Preble. And when the fire alarm went off, they just dropped what they were doing and they went to the fire, and that's how things were done. And but nowadays, you know, after 81 went up through Preble, 81, 281, and it changed our town, you know. by doing that, a person could live in Preble, get on 81, be to work in Syracuse in no time. At the end of the day, get in his car and come back, and he was back to Preble where he wanted to be, away from all the hullabaloo up there in Syracuse, you know, to Preble where it was peaceful. And 81 changed us a lot. And then also I've seen, and others in town, we've seen more people living full-time now, year-round, on the lakes. We have Little York Lake and Salm Lake. And it used to be they just came up in the summertime, you know, and stayed. Now they build beautiful homes on these lakes, and they're here year-round. And so that's a big change for us. But there again, I think it's because of 81 and the, you know, accessibility to other cities that you didn't want to live in. You want to live in the peace and quiet, and so you built in Preble. So we've seen things like that change our town. 81 made a big difference in our town. It went right up through the valley, tore up all that good farmland and put that road in. When they got to Homer, they went up on Side Hill, but when they come down through Preble, they tore right down through the valley there, you know. And we lost a lot of land that way. Let me see, I don't know what else I talked about the fire department. Well, the fire department today now, and I think other fire departments do too, they have a hard time keeping numbers up. You know, if there's a fire during the day, so many of the people work away from Preble, you know. And so when we get fires, lots of times we have to have, you know, mutual aid come in and help you with other small towns too, because you don't have them, you know. We've had an auxiliary up there since 1954 or so, and I brought their picture down here today somewhere. Another thing I wanted to tell you about, there must be something in the water in Preble too, because we've had two ladies, or three, become our oldest citizens by being 100 years old. And you don't hear very much about that. And this one here, our first one was Stella Curie. She was a longtime Preble historian, and your grandmother. And she was our first one that got to 100 years of age. And then she got to be 100, and this was Bessie Swayze. Her husband was Woody Swayze. He used to be the head of the county legislature back years ago. They had a little gas station up there on the corner in Preble. One year, I went to Bessie and I said to Bessie, I want you to ride the Memorial Day Parade this year. Oh dear, why do you want me to ride? Well, I said, because you're our oldest person in town. And well, what have I got to do? And well, she asked me that down by the boulder then. And so I said, I want you to ride in a parade. So I went up there that day, and there she was sitting down there in the car. She was waiting, and I got in with her. And she had lived in Preble for a number of years. And she said, well, you know, she says, I've never been down here before to this, at the monument to hear this program. I said, you never have come down to it? Oh, no. She said, I usually was fixing something for the picnic afterwards with all my family, or I was pumping gas. And so I said, well, you know, and so we were going to start up through town. Well, she says, what do I do? And I said, all you got to do is smile and wave your hand, Bessie. And so that's what she did, and I took that woman up through town. And I'm always so glad I did it, because, you know, she'd never done anything like that. So I would get the people that were, you know, our oldest people, and get them to ride in a parade, and we've lost them all by now too. And then one year I went to get Alice Reynolds. Well, she didn't know if she wanted to ride or not. You know, I said, have you ever been in a parade before? No. Okay. You know, so I talked to her two boys, and I said, when I come to Preble, I want to find your mother in a car. And so I got up there, and there she was. And one of the grandchildren had a convertible, a Mustang convertible with a top down. She went up through Preble in style. And her two boys were in the back seat, and Alice was in the front seat, and we went up through town. And I was just always glad that we did that, you know, because they lived there for years and years, you know, and people waved to them and everything. They were glad to see them, and so.
But then also in that picture with Grandma is Alice, or
Uh-huh.
Gladys Under.
Yeah,
Usher.
yeah,
And
and she was 99.
She lived to be 100 as well. She did.
Yeah.
Because we had a party for her up at the Brewster House
Yeah.
when she was there.
Yeah.
And Grandma and Gladys were good friends, you know, their
And
farms
how,
were
how long did your grandmother live? I forget.
101.
101? Okay, because I know Bessie lived to be 103.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I don't know about Mrs. Usher.
She was 100.
She got to 100.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So I always kind of think that's kind of nice to do. Those people live in your town all those years and somebody ought to know about it.
Mrs. Reelman didn't get that old, though,
Did
did she?
what?
Mrs. Catherine Reelman didn't get that old, did she?
No, no, no. And right now, because Alice was our last one, the oldest one, and she died the end of 2014, I think it was, she did. And now I believe the oldest person in our town would be William J. Van Patten out in
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Tesco Valley.
You're right.
They call him Big Barn Bill, so. That he would be our oldest citizen right now, I think, so. But, I don't know, I don't know what else to talk about. I could talk a lot because I don't mind talking about Preble.
Stores?
But,
Did you have a store?
pardon me?
Did you have a store?
In Preble? Yeah, they did. Did I, or did they have one in Preble?
They had one.
Preble, yeah. If you came up Steger Road, right to the end of Steger Road, there was a really, really big building there. And that was a grocery store for many years. It was called Green's Grocery.
That's right. Yeah, Green and
Yeah, Green's Grocery. And when we had our celebration there in '08, the one son came back to Preble. And we did see him, and I think maybe one of the sisters came back, but I didn't get to see her. And their family had lived in Preble and did that. And then they had other stores, you know, they had a couple gas stations.
And there was Nellies over in Baltimore.
And over in Baltimore, there was Nellie Gardner's store. You could go in there and buy ice cream, beer, and get gas in your car, and cheese.
And penny candy.
And penny candy, and she always had a huge big cheese that she would cut off, you know, and do that. I used to work up there when I lived in Baltimore. She'd go away, and I had one of my children was small, and I'd take a playpen over there and put him in it. And he'd sit there in the store, and people would come in and talk to him. So I used to work over there at Nellies. It was a great place, you know.
Well, my grandmother's parents lived 2 houses from
Yep.
that, going north on Route 11.
Yep.
So that's why we were able to go to Nellies' office.
Yeah, to go to Nellies, yeah. And that big building on the corner, that's a really, really old building there in Baltimore.
That was part of the stagecoach at one time,
Yeah,
too.
yeah. But when the train, they used to have a big, over in Baltimore, they had a thriving stagecoach business over there. But like about 1895, when the train came to Preble, that kind of ended the stagecoach business a lot. After that, it kind of changed, but before that, it was a big business.
Do you have any information about the trolleys coming up to Preble?
Yeah, it came up, was it 1906, somewhere in there. And it used to come way through to Preble, and it came to Preble right to where the Preble Road crosses over 281 there, right, the big white house on the corner. It ended right there. I don't know who lived there then, but it ended there. And it said, I found an article on that not long ago, and I put it in one of the Preble newspapers, that the people could get on in Cortland, and they had a big celebration up there one day. And they had, I don't know, like the boats, they were taking people for tours on the lake, and they had something like 52 boats going or something. I thought, wow, and it was a long time ago, you know, that they did that. But you could take the trolley up there and then go back to Cortland, I guess. But then you have any questions or anything? And you all know where Preble is. Hi, Judy. Okay.
I have kind of a humorous story about the cemetery, if that's possible.
What?
A humorous story about the cemetery.
Okay.
It starts out sad. My husband died, and 1977, but he had always said, this valley and this town gave me everything I had. And if I ever die, when I die, I want to be buried here in Preble. Well, his family was from the Catskills. I thought, oh great, I'm going to have a big fight on my hands if this ever happens. He died at 39. So I called the family and nobody fought with me, so he was buried in the Elmwood Cemetery. So my mother-in-law was still alive and she would call me and she would say, when I die, I want to be buried on top of Irv's grave. Is that okay with you? I would have agreed to anything this woman said. She was a terror. So I said, oh yes, sure, I agree with that. And a few years later, she died. My sister-in-law called me up and says, I don't know if you know it, but Mom thinks she's going to get buried on Irv's grave. I said, oh yes, I agreed to that. So she says, okay, we will send the ashes to you. Okay. So one day I go to my mailbox and it says, you have a package at the Preble post office. Sue Wright was working there then. So I knew her. I didn't want to go in and say, this is my mother-in-law. And so I thought, go in like really cheerful. How are your kids, Sue? Da 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 da. Take the package and leave, which I did. Got in the car and I looked at it and it said, Hannah B. Kaplan, from this date to that date. It was very obvious that it was a death. So I take the package home and I go in my garage and I go to put it down and I thought, well, you can't put Hannah in the garage. And I walked into my laundry area for the washing machine. Well, no, you can't do that. So I brought her in the kitchen. Well, I didn't want her in the kitchen. So I put her on the couch. And I thought, this is not going to work. I have to take it over there. My son was home, probably in his early 20s. And I said, Lou, I want to get a trowel, and I'm going over to the cemetery, and I'm going to bury your grandmother. He said, you can't do that. You need a pointed shovel. So I said, okay, you want to go with me? Yes. So we get the trowel, and we get the pointed shovel, and my mother-in-law put it in the vehicle and go to the cemetery. And if you've been there 100 times, you never see a maintenance person. There's no office. It's just like a little private garden or something. So we go to the grave. My son gets the shovel out. I'm telling you, he didn't have the shovel in the ground, and a maintenance man was there. He jumped off the lawnmower, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, this is Irv's mother, and I said that she could be buried right on top of his grave. You can't do that, he says. I have to know where everybody is. It's all got to be written down. You just can't do that. And I said, oh, I didn't know. And so he says, take that box and go put it in my car over there in the front seat. And I will take care of it. Well, you know, I felt it was my responsibility, but he worked for the cemetery, so I don't know what his name was. I took this box and I put it on the front seat of his car and drove away, and I thought, oh, I have no idea what's going to happen. Went back the next day. It was done.
Yeah. It probably was Pat Rowe.
I don't know who it was.
Yeah.
They must have thought I was
Dorothy's
crazy.
husband.
I just thought I could go with a trowel. I mean, you plant flowers, why couldn't you dig this hole and put another one? That's my cemetery.
Oh, that was fabulous.
We don't have unusual things that happen. I know one time, I don't know, it was a florist or who it was, but I guess they thought they had every right to do it. And they went in the cemetery and they were cutting down all the white, those nice white flowers that are always in cemeteries.
Hydrangea.
Is it?
Hydrangea.
Yeah, and they were just, you know.
Cutting to take?
Yeah, they were going to take them. And so I guess the maintenance man caught up with them and said, hey, you know, leave them alone there. And there was a florist of some kind and he wanted to take it.
Oh, boy.
So That's why when I went to the cemetery, I never pick one of them. I'm always wanting to think, yeah, I want to pick one of those. I don't pick them, you know. Because we have a lot of them in there. We have a lot of them in the cemetery there, you know. But
And you talk so much about, you know, Route 11 and 281, and right smack up the middle is Preble Creek. From Preble Swamp to Preble Creek, and Preble Creek goes into Little York Lake, and Little York Lake is the mouth of
yeah,
the east side of the Tappanooga River.
well, it's kind of low now.
It is. My grandfather on my father's side of the family is from Cortland, and when he first got married, he moved from Cortland working at Wickwires to go down to Johnson City and work for Endicott Johnson Shoes. But his love of his life was to fish. And his great places to fish was Grout Brook, which is, well, you know, over there by Skinny Alice Lake, and the other one was Preble Swamp and Preble Creek. And what I understood is that my cousin told me that my grandfather's younger brother would take my cousin, who's a couple months older than me, and my grandfather, and drop them off there by Rose on the Preble Crossroad, right there at the bridge. And my grandfather would say to my cousin, wait here, I'll be back for you. And my cousin said, Mary, it was forever. It felt like it was forever that Grandma finally came back and got me. But another story that I understand is that my grandfather would fish that. Probably his brothers would drop him off, because my grandfather didn't ever own a car. Dropped him off to fish, and he would fish that whole area, probably from your house all the way to the Curry Road. And then when he was finished, he'd walk up the street to my mother's. I'm speaking of my mother, who was Jean Curry Wood. I'm speaking of her father-in-law, my grandfather, would walk up to her mother's house and drop off the fish and say, here's supper.
Yeah, I know there's not many fish in there now. They used to stock it, but they don't anymore.
That's too bad.
And many
But
years
also
ago,
too, it's all
we went and because we had a lot of trouble with the fishermen.
I was going to say, it's private land now, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's why
I
people
mean,
don't fish it.
we didn't mind if Preble people came down because they knew how to, you know, behave or do things on there. But, you know, you get up in the morning and you see some guy at my lower lawn, and he's got my whole lower lawn, he's getting his fishing done, he's getting his outfit on like it's his property.
Right.
And they go down back there, just trot right on down through. When we got done, they trot back up on through. And maybe a half hour later, our cows were out, you know. They didn't, you know, they didn't.
Do you remember when
And a lot of them along there got tired of that, and they stopped it. You know.
Remember, I'm going to say at least 15, 20 years ago, there was that big, huge company that wanted to put in a gas station over there between the cemetery and 81 entrance.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people
Truck
really
stop.
fought that a lot
Truck stop, yeah.
to get rid of that.
Yeah, what was
And
it called?
James
Flying J. Yeah.
And I can remember that someone in my family, I'm not going to mention names, but she really just wanted absolutely nothing to do with it because of the property of the Curry Road and where that place was going to be, and then right there was Preble Swamp, and then it was going to kill all the fish because of the diesel and gasoline and all that. That was a possibility. And so my husband had gone fishing there at the Curry Road and had a picture of the fish that he had taken. I took the picture of the fish that he had caught and gave it to my aunt so she could use that picture to say, this is what I don't want to have happen because here's these beautiful fish. So anyways, it got stopped anyways. Yeah.
And of course, they had a plank road in Baltimore too. Plank road, the plank road, the way I've read about the plank road was, that, like I said, maybe it came through Baltimore, but it didn't go quite to Curry Road. It went like to Curry Road at one time. It was called the plank road. Because there was a story they go off and taught that I've heard and read about, that one night, during the night, the people in Baltimore were kind of awakened by these hoofbeats going through Baltimore on the plank road. And they thought later on it was kind of determined that they were moving a Cardiff Giant up through there, you know. Whether that's true or just a Baltimore story, I don't know. But
My
It's a
mother
good
was born in
story.
1924, and she says that she can remember a macadam road from Route 41 all the way on 281 to Preble, that it wasn't asphalt
right.
or stone or anything like that.
well, I don't know. And then you got East Hill and you got West Hill. West Hill goes over to Scott, and then East Hill goes over to Truxton and Hayes Golf. And that's gotten built, not Preble Hill, West Preble Hill hasn't gotten, but East Hill has got more homes on it now than it used to have. And got more, so.
Does the Preble Hotel still operate as a
Oh, yes.
Is a hotel?
Yes.
It's a
That
hotel.
doesn't operate as a hotel anymore.
Oh, yeah, they still got some rooms there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
How does
Yeah, they
anybody-
still got some room on the second floor. I understand the third floor you can't go into anymore, and that's where the ballroom was, or something that they used to have was there, but you can't go up in there anymore, I don't think. But no, Preble Hotel's still going, and they still have the frog pole.
They-
I think sometimes they have more frogs show up than people. You don't get, I don't think you see the people come anymore. Well, Judy can remember too, when it first started.
Yeah, it was a
You couldn't go
lot
down
scene.
Stager Road,
Yes,
could you?
yes.
You know,
I
you
think they
couldn't
don't
get down through
advertise,
town.
so it's.
But now, you know, yes, it's not so
How
bad.
do they find anybody to stay at the hotel?
They what?
How do they find anybody to stay at the hotel?
How did they do what?
Find it.
Get people to stay there?
At the Preble Hotel?
Yes.
Years ago?
No, now.
Oh, now? Oh, I don't know, but I do know.
Yes, people drink too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't drive.
Yeah.
I think they do have some people that live there. I think they do. Because our cemetery association has like a chicken barbecue and a bake sale every year. And I know there for a couple of years, there was a lady that came over and she about bought all our bake sales. She bought everything, about $40 worth of food. And then she had to have help taking it home. So one of our trustees says, well, I'll help you get it to your house. You live right around here. Oh, yes. And so they went and Sue didn't come back and didn't come back and didn't come back. And we said, where have you been? Oh, she said, she bought all those pastries and she said she lived on the second floor of Preble Hotel.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Maybe Chicago.
No, I don't know if that
And the train
question.
station is in Preble
Pardon me?
anymore. They tore the train station down
Yeah,
in Preble.
yeah, that's a shame, you know.
Was it on the north side of the Preble Crossroad or on the south side?
Was
Was it
that,
on the north side or the south side of Preble Crossroad?
I was on the west side of the railroad track.
Right.
Yeah, it was on the west side.
Oh, all right.
And that was another thing, because we've had a couple, had a couple big train wrecks that are like back in the 1890s or 1880s. And one of them, the train came from Syracuse, and I determined that it happened between where I live on Clark Road and the trestle down over Goodale Lake. And since I put the article in the Preble paper, I've had a couple people disagree with me, but I think I'm pretty right because some of our land is a little swampy there on my farm. But anyway, the train came down through there that night, and they had fixed the tracks because they'd had a lot of trouble with the train tracks. They would fix it all up and then it would just kind of sink, you know, and then they'd go in again. And they said they got it from on the side of the road, and on the side of that road down through there is where I think is where they got the stuff out of there. And they would fix it all up, and they thought they had it done for good. There's this one night, and the train came down through, and it started sinking. And to make a long story short, it started sinking, and what happened was they say that 17 cars are buried down there somewhere to this day. I don't know whether that's an old tale or what, but I've read it in a couple of books. Anybody remembers the Palmer man that wrote
Dick Palmer.
Richard.
Richard Palmer. And I found it in his book. He told about it in there. It's called Problems in Preble. And he wrote about this. And he said that it went down under, and it said to this day there's like 17 cars down there somewhere. And then another time, I think it was in 1895 or something, the train was coming again from Syracuse, and it got into near Preble, and someone had moved the track, you know, changed the rail, changed the track, and the engineer didn't know, and all of a sudden it came right up and it went into the depot up there and burst into flames, and it killed not the engineer, but one of the people on the train. It killed the people on the train, and that was a really bad accident. So they had two bad accidents with the trains. That's one thing I like to do where I live on Clark Road. the train still blows a whistle when it goes to Clark Road, even though nobody's going across, you know. Very seldom, you know. And it dead ends on the other side because 81 runs down through there. But from Route 11 to there, it's still Clark Road, and the trains come down through, and they blow the whistle every time when they get it. And whenever I am in my house, I open my one window curtain up, and I watch the train come down through, and I listen to the whistle blow. And now I got 3 grandchildren that like to do the same thing. So that's good, you know. So the train still goes through Preble, you know. But,
Ann,
uh-huh.
you mentioned a Richard Palmer that wrote a book, Problems
Yes,
in
he
Preble.
did, yeah.
Is he a gentleman that built the Preble store there before
Oh, no.
Don Wright
Oh,
was
no.
there?
No.
Oh, is he
No,
in that
was Don,
family?
that was Don Palmer.
Don Palmer.
Don Palmer.
Okay, because he also built the house, or,
Motel.
oh, okay, well, I
Oh,
didn't know
motel.
that.
Oh,
But
no,
my
Don
house
Palmer.
on Song Lake was
Oh.
his house. There's maybe 6 or 7 houses in a row at the beginning of Song Lake, and the second one is mine. And it was built by Don, did you say, Don Palmer?
No, Don Palmer, it was built by, he lived in Preble. Out there, out the Preble Road.
Yeah,
you are.
yeah,
I can't
when
remember his
911
name.
went through.
It was built by a man in Preble because he built the store there, and he also built the motel. I can't remember his name. But it was built by a Preble man.
Okay.
And they had different, and
'Cause
Walt Newman owned it for a while. Walt Newman owned it and ran it. And then you had a Palmer, or Palmer's name.
Yeah.
Palmer. And then you
Well-
had Doug Brown and
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, Don Wright and Doug
the rest of
Brown.
them were there.
Well, I had heard that when you go all the way back to the beginning of my house being built in the 50s or 50, it was a Palmer gentleman that built it, and he worked or had whatever the Preble store. But maybe that, I wondered if you thought that was correct.
I don't think so. I don't
Yeah.
think that Mr. Palmer built.
Okay. Because then, you know where I am on Song Lake, so then the little, I call it a horseshoe road that's
Uh-huh.
there at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, when 911 went through a couple decades ago, then they named that little road, which didn't have a name, we were just Song Lake Road,
Yeah.
but they named it Palmer Road.
Yeah.
And so I just wondered what you might know about that Palmer gentleman. Yeah.
No, I don't. No,
Okay.
I don't. But I can see what I can find out.
Yeah, that'd be
I don't know.
great. Because I didn't know if the story was ever true, and I retold it. You know, it was the gentleman that built the Preble store because that's what I had been told. But then you tell a much different
Yeah,
history
his,
of the Preble store.
There was a man that lived in Preble, and he lived up in the western part of the town there before you get to George McAvoy, or the McAvoy farm. He lived back from there a little ways. I can't remember his name. And he did build some things in Preble.
Yeah.
He was a very good builder, and he built some things in Preble.
And the houses were all quite similar. You know, not the first house that the Sops built. The first house was different and built by those people. But then there was like 5 or so houses in a row. And they were all pretty much the same. And they were year-round, but they were cottages too. You know, like I'm trying to think of the name of some of the business gentlemen. Well, the house next to me was Abdullah Dairy. That was their place. And there was Mr. Ferris, you know, a couple up, you know. And, but my father was a builder, so he's changed my house over the decades. But they were all year-round, but they were cottages. People used them, you know, for fishing camps and maybe winter fun, I don't know. But anyway, I was just curious what you knew about this Mr. Palmer. And there has to be a history somewhere, because when they renamed that, when they named that little road there, they named it Palmer.
Palmer Road, yeah,
Yeah, well, thank you.
yeah.
Just wondered.
No, I'm not sure. I know Song Lake has changed a lot, it's really, you know.
Well, the whole time I've been there 51 years,
Yeah.
and like you described it, when I first moved there, it was pretty much me and there weren't very many people there year round. It was me and the dog and eventually a baby.
They have beautiful homes up there now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally different.
Yeah,
You know,
in
it's-
Little York too, Little
like
York
you
is
say,
nice
yes,
home.
like a bedroom community for Syracuse or Cortland or
Yeah, that's
different
what we are.
places. And people over the decades, the school bus just kept getting fuller and fuller and fuller. I mean, you had a school bus right there full on Song Lake. But people sold their other properties, whether they were in Cortland or Syracuse, and put everything into the home, redoing it or enlarging it, or even if they bought a piece of land and the house wasn't in very good shape, or maybe it was just a summer cottage, they might take it down, or if there was anything left to work with, go down to the base and rebuild. But it's changed, totally changed.
And of course, you go down on that one side, and they got the Girl Scout camp.
Oh, yeah, that's across the lake from
That's
me,
just across the lake.
which is
They're still
wonderful.
operating.
Yes,
You know.
yeah, and they do entertain other groups
Yeah.
other than the Girl
Yeah.
Scouts. And it's beautiful to hear the kids singing and playing and hear the lunch bells. And it seems whenever they go out on boat trips, rowboats or canoes, there's always seems to be wind that comes up. And some of the counselors and different lake people have to go down and kind of get them, because they have to
Yeah.
go against the wind to get back up to their docks.
Yeah, it's always been, it's always been really active up there for the Girl Scouts for a long time.
Yeah, very, very nice.
Now there's,
We've had a lot,
there's Goodale Lake and then Little York and,
Yeah, Goodale Lake is on Route 11 there,
Mhm.
And then the water goes under the trestle and it goes over into Little York Lake. Yeah, you're right, you go under that trestle, there's a trestle down there and it goes right under Little York Lake. Or goes right into Little York Lake, that way.
is it Preble Lake too?
No, it's called Goodale Lake, I've always called it Goodale Lake. And then I have a sign there, but Goodale Lake. They do a lot of ice fishing there in the winter, so they use a lot there. Yes.
You mentioned Preble newspaper. Are there newspapers in Preble?
Well, yeah.
Supplement to
We do publish a little Preble newsletter about every, as the season change, about 4 times a year. Yeah, and I always write an article in there, and then they have a lot of interesting things in there about what's going on in Preble. No, we don't sell it. We don't sell it.
Just like to know about it.
And all the addresses of people in Preble, and they mail them out to everybody. So, yeah, we do that. Well, thanks for asking me.
Thank